Okie doke. So, do you like to be called Senator Beffort, Senator Wilson Beffort?
I don't mind being called Sue or Sue Wilson
Hey Sue,
Beffort
okay.
or
Alrighty.
Senator Beffort, whatever feels good.
Senator Sue.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, cool. What I want to do was ask you briefly about, I know you're a big supporter of early childhood development, and would you tell me why and what your experience has been?
Well, one of the big advantages that I've had as a legislator is that I was a single mom. And I did raise my two boys that have just turned out so beautifully. I'm so proud of both of them. But I raised them by myself. I struggled. I had very limited income for support. And my two children went through the system of child care centers, and I can remember every time I became a little more successful, got a little bit more money, I would upgrade their child care facility. And so, you know, I've been there and I've lived that. And now that I'm up here and there is the vast array of issues surrounding teenage pregnancy, school dropout was really what put the potential solution in the mainstream, because we have this enormous dropout problem. And we know when that happens that you're generally going to be in a life of poverty. You could be in a life of crime. You certainly probably are going to have trouble raising your own children. And so I started thinking, well, this has been going on for all this time. They started taking programs out of the public school system, especially at the time when they need the most, like after-school activities and intramural sports. Not everybody is an interscholastic football player. And so I can remember when I was young, you know, you were in plays, and the ones that really couldn't learn their lines, they worked the curtains and they did the props and they did this. And so I started thinking, you know, how are we going to start moving this barge? Because it is an enormous barge when you talk about the financial resources and the programs that are necessary to step back and say, we don't want our next generation to have to deal with the problems that this current generation has done in terms of low-income families and all of the things that go along with the problem with poverty and drugs and everything. And so at that point, I thought we need to get to the children that are born to teenage parents that may not have a father in place, and to people that really may be in a crime neighborhood, to be able to take their little children and give them the education and the early programs that lead to the public school education, and take them and put them in an environment where they start seeing, I can be everything that I want to be in my life. I can be a doctor, I can be anything that I want, and what it takes is for me to stay in school and learn to read and do the best that I can be. And of course, one of the other things that I started understanding is once a child was hitting first grade, they already felt not up to par with other children in the class that probably did have resources where they could read. In fact, I know that they had Redbird groups and Bluebird, and everybody knows who the Redbirds are, and everybody knows. And so immediately the children start feeling like second-class citizens. And they forever think, oh, gee, I'm not one of them because they're the smart ones, and they're this and that, and I'm... And so to start really getting into earlier childhood precursors to learning social skills, music, all the love for school, which includes art and fun play and learning how to obey and all the things and the precursors to reading and math and so on, so that by the time they get into kindergarten, they're ready for starting to learn how to become a K through 12 student. And so then the hope is going to be that when they hit the first grade and they're actually in real school, that they're right there with everybody else, even though they may not have those advantages at home. So it's a very complex solution to a very critical problem that we have.
Absolutely. And Is the suggestion, the constitutional amendment, which would take a capped amount of money from the so-called permanent fund, is this, do you think, a good idea, ma'am?
Well, I think that people know that I did not support that amendment. The problem that I had with the amendment was that we've already usurped the money from the severance tax permanent fund, so basically it's not growing anymore. And if we do the same thing to the land tax permanent fund, then we will start then eroding the money that goes out for education. That's what the funds are for.
And even with the caps that were suggested?
Well, the problem with the caps is it was very vague. The accountability was vague. And we depend on a set amount coming out from that so that through good times and bad, we have that money available for education and higher education. And so to be able to say, well, we'll stop it at $8 billion, but well, by that time you've eroded the fund down to the point where basically you would have to raise taxes or property taxes or something so that you could make up for the money that was not materializing from the corpus. And so my point about that is if we continue to yearly move more and more programs into early childhood. We now have home visiting, we have all kinds of little programs for 2-, 3-year-old toddlers. We have all kinds of things that are targeted. I in no way have ever felt that some of these real early programs should be universal. And I debate that with my colleagues because we don't have enough money in the world for universal, for everybody to be visited at home when they're born, and you know, all of these things where really families that are in good tact and have the means don't need that resource, as opposed to targeting it towards maybe that single mother that really doesn't understand anything about babies, doesn't understand what neglect is and good nutrition and things of that nature, so that we target our money to really have it surgically applied to those that need it. And so to be able to then say, okay, well, is the the 3+ program where they have an extra 60 days in school after kindergarten, is that a worthy expenditure? Well, I say yes. That's because we know that children many times with working families and being left maybe supervised by somebody that wasn't going to be beneficial to cultivating their growth, or maybe just letting them sit in front of the television or television, would that be good? So I see that as a valued program because it allows certain children, it's only an option and it's targeted towards low income, to, if their parents choose, or their mother or their single parent chooses, they can put them into a public program, not have to pay, and give them 2 more months of targeted, cultivated classrooms. And that's not all studying and bad things. That's playing, and it's music, and it's social skills, and it's being around other children, and it's positive input, so that by the time they then go into their next year, they haven't lost that time, which many children are going to digress with all the good progress, some of them because they've just been left in front of a TV all day, and not good nutrition and that sort of thing.
And so is there anything, if we recognize that early childhood development is so critical to children growing up, to providing a well-educated and stable workforce in New Mexico, how do we go ahead and finance that?
Well, again, I don't feel that all programs should be universal, as I mentioned, because families with means can spend their money how they choose, and they generally have summer camps, and they have activities and that sort of thing for their children, summer football, and all these things that families that can afford it do. So to say that we should have pre-K for all families, or that we should have 3-year-old programs or universal of anything, we can't afford it. First of all, we're a poor state. Who's going to pay the taxes for everybody to get everything? And so I feel that we've made giant steps forward by getting a bipartisan input on these early programs, and to say where should our very scarce earnings, especially when we've had 2 or 3 years of a very sad downturn in our economy. So we've had to cut all kinds of programs. So we've got limited resources. We can't. Well, some people say you can raise taxes. I believe that when you raise taxes, then it stifles growth and it stifles jobs, and sometimes it's very regressive to poor. That's the reason I'm having a problem with, for instance, the gasoline tax, because poor people and people on fixed income, that tax is given to everybody. So let's take a look and get scientific research on the programs that have been studied and have been proven to be the most effective in benefiting our very youngest children. And that's through testing and other types of resources that they use to be able to value surveys and that sort of thing, to value the progress that children are making, and be very careful about applying them to those that really need the programs. And then as a poor state, I really truly believe that that is the way you bring the state up out of poverty.
Wonderful. Senator Sue, thank you very, very much.